my English name is Julia Candlish. I was born Julia Londo. So my family, my parents, my mother is Haudenosaunee, Wolfland Mohawk, and my father is not First Nation. And so when they got married in 1958, and at that point in time, through the Indian Act, my mom had to lose her status when she married my dad. I was growing up in a time where I guess maybe my mom wasn't embracing her heritage in the same way she does now. And I think a lot of that had to do with the fact that she had to lose her status when she got married. And so when I was very young, we spent a lot of time visiting relatives on the reserve, Six Nations Grand River Territory, and so spent a lot of time there. But it was kind of funny because if we were talking about Indians at school, my mom would tell me, "You're not an Indian. You are what your father is, and your father's French." I thought it was kind of weird because I loved being an Indian. I loved going to the reserve, I loved dancing, I loved, everything about it. But then there was this part of our lives where you're not really allowed to tell people about it. It was kind of like, not really shameful, but just something that we hid a little bit, right? And I wasn't supposed to tell people I was an Indian at school. When we were talking about Indians, I thought, yeah, yay, I'm one, and to tell people about it. But yeah, she told me I wasn't allowed to do that. So then it was, that's the kind of the way that we grew up. Grew up with some First Nation interaction. A lot of family interaction for sure. My grandparents were First Nation, and I spent a lot of time with them when I was younger as well, so that was nice. And then in 1986, when my mother was able to get her status back, right, because of Bill C-31, I believe it was, in the Indian Act, or the change and amendment to the Indian Act, she got her status back, and then that meant I could get status as well. And it was like a switch almost. All of a sudden, my mom was super interested in everything Native. And her and I went on this journey together where we would go to gatherings and we would go to meetings, and we got involved in our community, and we did some volunteer work and things like that, and really started learning a lot about First Nation heritage, and I specifically Mohawk. She took me to the Longhouse. I got my name, and it was wonderful. So that really kind of opened things wide up for me in the late 80s, and into the early 90s. And then what I found was that I had a real passion for this, and I had not finished my university schooling. When I was doing my undergrad, I always wanted to know why there is so much disparity in the world, right? So why are some countries so poor and impoverished? Why is there hunger? All of these kinds of things, right? So I took international development as an undergrad, and going through international development, I kept on focusing all of my projects that I could on First Nations issues and concerns, Indigenous issues and concerns around the world. And it really expanded my horizon because I was really understanding what my heritage was, but then it gave me the relationship to the broader context when I did the undergrad in international development. And then from there, I thought, I really want to devote the rest of my life to working with First Nation communities and ensuring that we're moving away from the Indian Act, the oppression of the Indian Act, even though it was the Indian Act that actually, the amendment to the Indian Act, that kind of gave our family this kind of renewed focus on our heritage. I think it meant a lot more to my mom, because I think if my mom had have started on her journey back, into her roots and things like that, then I would have just went with her anyways, because I always had this real interest in my heritage. But for her, I think the fact that she lost that.
Right, she had it.
She had it, and then it was taken away, and she got it back, and it meant a lot to her because of that.